Chapter 5. Emotional About the Moon. The sky was alive with its vivid blues and hues as the mesmerizing view of the line across the sky leading towards the distance seemed to be never-ending. The horizon conceals so much in its veil, no one can help but wonder what lies beyond it. What calls out to you? What do you— Kev, Kev, caviar, she screamed, breaking his concentration from the clouds zipping out past the horizon towards them. What? He answered, jumping as he turned his head at her. Did you hear anything I just said? She asked, placing her hand on her hip as she stood in the doorway. I think so, he replied, as he turned back to look at the sky from the balcony. I told you that we have to get ready for the full moon gathering. Dad's waiting for us, she said, fixing her navy blue hair behind her ear. Isn't that till tomorrow, though? He asked, turning around to fully face her. Yeah, but Dad wants to do a full run-through at least once before all the council members arrive tomorrow night, she continued. Her dark brown skin gleamed in the midday sun as the clouds shifted out of its way. But that's so boring, he said, dragging out his words, followed by a cheeky little chuckle. Come on, she said, sucking her teeth. You sound like Raph. It's not even that bad. Hey Cameron, what's taking so long? Why'd you come? She asked the man behind her as he walked up to both of them. I don't want to be there by myself, he replied. It's so boring, he continued, dragging out his words. See, even Raph thinks so, Caviar replied, chuckling as he got up from his seat on the balcony, walking back into the room. Just come on, please, she whined, grabbing his hand as she pulled him towards the door. I mean, we all have to go anyway, so, he replied, letting her pull him out into the hallway. What were you staring at so deeply before I screamed at you? She asked as the three of them walked down the hallway. The velvet sheen of the crimson carpet stretched all the way down the wide corridor. He was doing it again? Raphael asked as he trailed along behind them, his vibrant green eyes dulled by the ever-present strands of hanging hair in front of them. The sleepy, unamused impression stretched across his face never seemed to change as his monotone voice butted into the conversation. Yes, that's like the fourth time since yesterday, right? She said, looking back at Raphael in agreement. I like cloud watching is all, Kev said, trying to play it off. Right, she said, side-eyeing him. Come on, Cam, don't be like that, he said, positioning his hands behind his head, his elbows sticking up, all smug as he tried to play it off. To me, it looks like you're waiting for something to happen, or someone to show up, Cam replied, as they continued towards the big door at the end of the hall where two guards stood in the way. Hey, Khan, hey, so wazah, Kev said, his tongue hanging out trying to get them to smile. I'll get you two one of these days. Welcome, your majesties, allow us, the guard said as they stepped to either side of the door, slowly sliding it open. As the doors opened into a massive banquet hall, two men stood towards the center, engaged in a deep conversation. Thank you, they all said as they entered the hall. The handcrafted window frame stood solid in the wall as the sun beamed down through them, illuminating the smooth, golden-plated floor of the hall. The grand chandelier draped down from the high ceiling, glistening as the massive crystals reflected the sunlight dancing around the room. The tables stood still, neatly arranged, bare, awaiting their tablecloths and flower arrangements. Finally, you three are here, one of the men from the hall said, as he got up and turned toward them. I have something important to tell all of you before we start, he continued, walking towards them as they met him. His broad shoulders and commanding voice spoke to his stature and authority in the room. His fair skin, determined eyes paired with his forehead wrinkles and chestnut brown hair slowly turning gray, alluded to his age. However, he carried himself with dignity. Yeah, what is it, Dad? Cameron asked, tilting her head as her hair slipped off her shoulder. Her iridescent blue eyes, Full lips and dark brown skin were the only ones in the room with such an elegant combination of features. Tomorrow evening at the meeting, I'm going to propose we hold off on Founders' Day this year, their father said as they all sat around the empty table. Wait, why? Keviar asked, looking concerned. Dad, what are you talking about? I was talking with Johann, he replied, gesturing to the elderly man behind him. His poise and formal stature fit for a king's right-hand man. His red hair, now graying neatly pulled back into a small bun at the back of his head. And I think we should hold off on the celebration this year. But it's Founders' Day. Dad, everyone loves that day, besides Ember and Year Day, Keviar continued, confused by his father's words. He's right, Dad. The preparations have already started for next week. We can't let the people down, Cameron said, butting in. Yes, I know our people, and I know the love and pride we hold for it, but we have to look at the alternatives, he said, looking down, shamefully. The gold buttons on his uniform flashed as the sun struck them at the right angle. The crops from the eastern fields are overrun with relentless weeds. The fish from the west have stopped their migration along our shores, and worst of all, the Naloan herbalists have returned home and the little crops we had left will soon wither away, he said, breaking down. Not to mention the rumors of people disappearing in the east, Johann butted in, his mature yet shaky voice sounding concerned. Right. Because of these reasons we must focus on helping the people. I don't think a grandeur celebration will help, he continued. I'm so sorry to be late, Your Majesty. Someone from behind them yelped as the doors behind them slid open. There seemed to be a delay with the decorations for tomorrow night's gathering, but they should be here before tonight, said a tall, slim, almost gangly, middle-aged man walking towards them. Ah, Hassan, I was wondering where you went off to, he said, looking up at the man. Yes, I am sorry about that, Hassan replied, bowing slightly. No worries. Come, I was just telling my children about the idea I had for Founding Day in 2 weeks, Dante said, as Hassan stood before them at the table. Ah, yes, I heard about it from Johann this morning and I was shocked, Hassan replied. Right, it's crazy, Keviar said, trying to add some liveliness. Indeed, Sir Keviar, he replied. If I may say something, he began. I know you have the country's best interests at heart, but think about what it would do to the morale of the citizens, he continued. I know I haven't worked for you as long as Johann, but in the entire 300-year history of Kane, we've never missed a Founding Day celebration, he said. If we held off on it now, the people would know that we've slipped, or that something terrible has happened to the country. I see what you mean, Dante said, bringing his hands up to his chin and leaning against the table. I'll take it into account before tomorrow's gathering, but for now let's do our full run-through, he said, getting up. Whatever you choose, I know it will be in the best interest of the people, Hassan said, bowing his head towards Dante again. Break. I told you it would be boring, Keviar said, as the three of them walked back down the corridors leaving the banquet hall. Yeah, Dad seemed a little on edge, you know, Cameron said, fiddling with the ends of her hair. Yeah, I sensed it too, Raphael said, his arms folded as they all walked down the brightly lit hallway. The sun now dipped below the horizon and the palace came alive with lights. I hope he doesn't stress too much, Cameron replied. He's always been like that, though, hasn't he? Kev chuckled. No, he wasn't, Cameron said, looking down to the floor. Before, he always had a smile on his face. Before Mom... Oh, he replied, looking over at them as a veil of despair passed over them. As they continued their walk, a brief moment of awkwardness crept into their banter. Oh, look, Magni is full tonight, Keviar said, running to one of the open windows. The moon in all of its ethereal glory glowed more and more as the night sky settled in. The other moon stood still, barely visible, as Magni, the prominent moon in the sky, stole its splendor. It's just the moon, Kev. Next month, Loon will be full again and Magni will be new, Cameron said, walking up behind him as she looked up at it. Yeah, but which one is your favorite? He asked, staring at it. I like Magni. It's big and makes the waves go higher, Raphael said, joining them. Of course you would say that, she said, jokingly rolling her eyes. I like Loon. It might be a little smaller, but it does the same thing. It's trying its best, you know, she continued. Okay, sentimental much, Caviar said, gently knocking her shoulder, but I know what you mean. For me, I like both, he said. One without the other just seems incomplete, alone, longing for its other half. Whoa, okay, and you called me sentimental, huh? Cameron said, chuckling. Yeah, it's just something I've thought about a lot, he continued. Wait, are you that emotional about the moon? She asked. No, what do you mean? He asked, looking back at her. Then why are you crying? She asked, looking at him concerned. What do you mean? No, he started to say, touching his face as tears slipped out unconsciously. Kev, you're crying a lot. What's happening? Cameron asked frantically. I don't know, he said, wiping his face as the tears poured down, his face starting to get hot. His limbs began to tense as he fanned himself with his shirt. Yo, Kev, what's happening to you? Raphael asked, a hint of emotion slipping into his voice. I just feel really hot, I don't know, he said, panic setting in, his eyes bulged. Cameron stuttered, trying to figure out what to do. Someone help! She screamed down the hall. He gently gripped his throat, falling to the ground as he tried to cradle some airflow into his lungs. His arms shook violently as the ringing in his ears sent shockwaves throughout his body. Someone help! They both yelled, looking up and down the hall for a guard. Yes! Someone screamed. Lady Cameron, Sir Raphael, what's happening? Hassan yelped as his flailing limbs scampered down the hallway. It's Kev, she screamed, tears falling onto her skirt. Tears poured down his face, frozen in fear. Fighting to inflate his lungs, he retracted his legs as Cameron placed her hand on his back, and Raphael fell to his knees, looking on in horror. I'll get your father, he screamed. Please hurry, she yelped. Kev, if this is one of your sick practical jokes, stop it right now. Calm, can't you do something? Raph asked, trying to fan Caviar with his massive hands. No, I don't know what to do, she howled frantically as snot dripped from her nose onto her lip. Kev, breathe! Breathe! They both yelled as he clung there, shriveled on the floor. Why now? He asked himself. Why is this happening now? What caused it now? Why is it worse? The feeling of inescapable dread washed over him, engulfing his thoughts as the tears continuously flowed down. The veins in his hands felt like they were on fire, traveling up his forearm up to his palms. Caviar! Dante screamed from down the hall as he sprinted towards them, fear in his eyes. Hassan, call the medic. Dad, please, Cameron yelled out hysterically. He's barely breathing. Son, breathe, he yelped, falling to his knees as he embraced Caviar on the floor. Not him, not again. Oh, great spirits, please, he screamed out, looking out at the sky. Almighty, please. As they stood there, emotions ran high as the hustle and bustle around the palace came to a standstill, waiting for something to happen. As he closed his eyes, he could feel the sweat dripping down his forehead. He held his hands out before him, petrified of them as more and more heat gathered in his hands. However, he hadn't moved. He stood still as his consciousness slipped away. The room began to grow fuzzy as the panicked voices of everyone huddled around him died down into complete silence. Dad, what happened? Cameron asked, leaning in to check on Caviar, who lay limp in his arms. I don't know, I think he passed out or something, Dante said, examining him all over. Look, he's breathing, he yelled as his chest gradually rose and sank like normal. Almighty, what was that? She said, looking at Keviar's peaceful, droopy face. I could be wrong, but that seemed like a panic attack, Raphael said. Why, what? Why would he have a panic attack? Dante asked erratically. Your Majesties, I'm here, Hassan yelled from down the hall, their heads all turning to see. I've got the medic, he continued, as another man from behind him with a long white cloak ran up to them. Excuse me, Your Majesty. I need you to step aside and tell me what happened here, the medic said, as he got to his knees, taking Keviar from him. I don't know, Dante said, fear still woven through his voice. He just started slowly gasping for air, and then all of a sudden he fell over and it looked like he was fighting to breathe or something, Cameron said as she helped her father get up. From what I can see here, he said, placing his hand over Keviar's chest and closing his eyes. He's breathing fine right now. What you've explained seems to be in accordance with a panic attack, he continued. Could there have been a trigger you were unaware of? Any sense foreign to you? No, we were just talking about the moon, and she replied, holding her father as Raphael placed an endearing hand on her shoulder. I see. The short, erratic gasps for air during the attack can tend to leave the patient lightheaded, prone to fainting or dizzy spells, he said. I recommend some herbal tea for when he wakes up, but for now, the prince could use a bed and some time to wake up. Okay, Dante said, breathing a sigh of relief. I'll take him to his room, Raphael said, a small tear falling from his chin. I'll go with you, Cameron said, as the medic slowly lifted him up into Raphael's arms. His biceps stood firm like tree trunks and he easily carried him down the hall, with Cameron closely trailing behind him. I'll be right there, you two, Dante yelled out at them. If you don't mind me saying, the medic started to say as he got up, brushing off this cloak. I think you could use some calming tea as well, Your Majesty. Thank you, but right now I think I'll go and find Johann to get that herbal tea from him, he replied. I think you need to take the medic's advice, Your Majesty, Johann said, startling both of them as he walked up from behind. But, he started to say. No buts, my old friend, Johann said, putting his hand on Dante's shoulder. His somber eyes and concerned brows made it evidently clear that he was right. I heard the medic as I walked over here. Sir Keviar will be fine. You, on the other hand, should sit down. You've been at it all day, he continued. I suppose you're right, he said as he watched them walk away, barely visible down the hallway as they turned the corner. I just can't lose anyone again.